Merry Christmas. This is like a late Christmas present because I know you didn't get everything you wanted for Christmas. So Elon Musk decided that the Fauci files, which we've been waiting for, would come out today. And I do have to question the timing. Why is it that some of this information seemed to come out at times when the news media wouldn't necessarily pick up on it? But this is the biggest story, the story about the government covering up true information about the shots. And geez, I actually thought about it, and YouTube has very specific and strict guidelines. So I'm going to be saying things probably that at one time on YouTube would have been against the rules. So I'm just hoping that because it's a news story, I'm reading it off Twitter and it's from a real reporter. In this case, David Zweig, that it'll be acceptable, and I'll add the standard disclaimers. The disclaimer being that the WHO and local health authorities have confirmed that the vaccine is safe and effective. The COVID vaccines are safe and effective. And also, I can't say that they don't slow the spread. And I can't say certain other things about the shots or the jibby jabs. We have to come up with our own baby words to operate on YouTube. So it will still wait to hear what the Twitter files reveal. I'm sorry, the YouTube files. Because I had a channel taken down for covering true content about the jibby jabs. And I don't want that to happen again, certainly, but I'm still going to read it. So I already gave the disclaimer about what the WHO and local health authorities say. Welcome back. Welcome everybody who's coming in. If you want to support the stream, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/lifttheveil and leave me a note and I'll read it on my stream. All right, I'll start with the thread. This is from David Zweig. This time, the Twitter files, how Twitter rigged the COVID debate by censoring info that was true but inconvenient to U.S. government policy, by discrediting doctors and other experts who disagreed, by suppressing ordinary users, including some sharing the CDC's own data. So far, the Twitter files have focused on evidence of Twitter's secret blacklists, how the company functioned as a kind of subsidiary of the FBI, and how execs rewrote the platform's rules to accommodate their own political desires. What we have yet to cover is COVID. This reporting for the Free Press is one piece of that important story. So the Free Press is Barry Weiss and a number of other people, but the Free Press is something that Barry Weiss is involved in, and David Zweig. So the United States government pressured Twitter and other social media platforms to elevate certain content and suppress other content about COVID-19. Internal files at Twitter that I viewed while on assignment for the Free Press showed that both the Trump and Biden administrations directly pressed Twitter executives to moderate the platform's pandemic content according to their wishes. So this is like absolutely 100. These Twitter files, this has to be reported on. And I don't know if the mainstream media will cover it, but this is First Amendment violations when the government censors you and the government pressures for censorship especially of true information, but forget it. You're allowed to share false information. At the onset of the pandemic, according to meeting notes, the Trump admin was especially concerned about panic buying. They came looking for, quote, help from the tech companies to combat misinformation about runs on grocery stores, unquote. But there were runs on grocery stores. So the Trump White House, specifically Michael Kratsios, led the Trump administration's calls for help from the tech companies to combat misinformation. Areas of focus included conspiracies around 5G cell towers, runs on grocery stores, and misinformation that could stoke panic buying and behaviors. It wasn't just Twitter. The meetings with the Trump White House were also. Can you figure out what these people are doing, these journalists? What are these screenshots of? Is that a screenshot? Is it a picture of a computer screen taken with a iPhone? Because that's what Barry Weiss did with her screen shares too. Do we have tech journalists that don't know how to take screenshots, and is he just sharing this because it doesn't fit in a tweet? Because there is a story version of this. There is a story version of this. Maybe I'll go over to that instead of the. I laugh at people who can't take screenshots, but that's what it, I guess, looks like. Twitter, it wasn't just Twitter. The meetings with the Trump White House were also attended by Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and others. Twitter, alongside several other tech companies, including Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, participated. Activities included a standing weekly call to share general trends and hosting a shared Microsoft Teams group. Some of the companies, not Twitter, gathered open sourced information from researchers. Other teams fed this information to the Twitter policy enforcement teams. Okay. When the Biden admin took over, one of their first meeting requests with Twitter executives was on COVID. The focus was on anti-vaxxer accounts, especially Alex Berenson. So this says, but I don't know what these screenshots are screenshots of. They're text, but I don't know what they're text from. So I don't know what the source is. But yeah, you can see this one is taken with the mouse cursor still showing. One of the first meeting requests from the Biden White House was about COVID misinformation. Per regular process, public policy took the meeting. Biden's staff focused on vaccines and high-profile anti-vaxxer accounts, including Alex Berenson. Wow. Alex Berenson is lucky that it became known that the government interfered and told them to throw him off the platform. We need the YouTube files for how they decided to remove channels like mine. In the summer of 2021, President Biden said social media companies were killing people for allowing vaccine misinformation. Berenson was suspended hours after Biden's comments and kicked off the platform the following month. Berenson sued and then settled with Twitter. In the legal process, Twitter was compelled to release certain internal communications, which showed direct White House pressure on the company to take action on Berenson. And here is Slack channel where they're saying that they really want to get Alex Berenson kicked off. It says right here, how was the White House? This person says, overall pretty good. They had one really tough question about why Alex Berenson hadn't been kicked off from the platform. Otherwise, their questions were pointed but fair, and mercifully, we had answers. Man, Imagine being Alex Berenson, like public enemy number one. What about Robert Malone? It was thrown off for no reason. Or Dr. McCullough. A December 2022 summary of meetings with the White House by Lauren Culbertson, Twitter's head of U.S. public policy, adds new evidence of the White House's pressure campaign and cements that it repeatedly attempted to directly influence the platform. Culbertson wrote that the Biden team was very angry that Twitter had not been more aggressive in deplatforming multiple accounts. They wanted Twitter to do more. And this says, the Biden team was not satisfied with Twitter's enforcement approach, as they wanted Twitter to do more to deplatform several accounts. Because of this dissatisfaction, we were asked to join several other calls. They were very angry in nature. Here's a presentation the Twitter team used. Twitter executives did not fully capitulate to the Biden team's wishes. An extensive review of internal communications at the company revealed employees often debating moderation cases in great detail and with more care than was shown by the government toward free speech. So, in other words, Twitter was more circumspect, while Twitter was more careful about removing people than the government. The government just said, throw them off. And Twitter said, well, you have to have a reason, etc. The government didn't care. But Twitter did suppress views, many from doctors and scientific experts, that conflicted with the official positions of the White House. As a result, legitimate findings and questions that would have expanded the public debate went missing. Yeah, this is a really, really big story. We knew it was true. Yes. But now we know that it's true, which is different because we have the receipts now. There were three serious problems with Twitter's process. First, much of the content moderation was conducted by bots trained on machine learning and AI. Impressive in their engineering, yet still too crude for such nuanced work. Second, contractors in places like the Philippines also moderated content. They were given decision trees to aid in the process, but tasking non-experts to adjudicate tweets on complex topics like myocarditis and mask efficacy data was destined for a significant error rate. They have people in the Philippines doing content moderation. People in the Philippines are very nice, so they make good call centers. But I don't know if they know about myocarditis, which, by the way, no, I'm not even going to get into it. Myocarditis has been recognized as an official side effect of the vaccine. So if you see people saying on YouTube that the vaccines can cause myocarditis, that's because it's an official recognized side effect. Certain other things that people say are side effects, like sudden death, for example, are not confirmed side effects and are therefore conspiracy theories and certainly wouldn't be allowed on this platform. So you can't say things like that. But here's where we're going to get into some data and facts, which could be inconvenient for the platform we're on, because Twitter has stopped censoring people for medical misinformation. So if you want to, you can actually share actual misinformation now if you wanted to, and they won't censor you. But before it was different, and this is dealing with the before. Third, most importantly, the buck stopped with higher level employees at Twitter who chose the inputs for the box and decision trees and subjectively decided escalated cases and suspensions. As it is with all people and institutions, there was individual and collective bias. With COVID, the bias bent heavily toward establishment dogmas. Inevitably, dissident yet legitimate content was labeled as misinformation, And the accounts of doctors and others were suspended both for tweeting opinions and demonstrably true information. Okay, here we go. For example, Exhibit A, Dr. Martin Kulldorff, an epidemiologist at Harvard Medical School, tweeted views at odds with U.S. public health authorities and the American left, the political affiliation of nearly the entire staff at Twitter. And this tweet from Martin Kulldorff says, no, thinking that everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. COVID vaccines are important for older, high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children, he said, March 15th. And that would be March 15th, 2021. And that was someone who asked him, do you think younger age groups and or people who already have the virus need to be vaccinated? And he said, no, people with natural prior infection don't need to be vaccinated, which some people said, and they censored people who said that. Internal emails show an intent to action by a moderator saying Kulldorff's tweet violated the company's COVID-19 misinformation policy and claimed he shared false information. So this is an email that says heads up, intent to take action. It says specifically by sharing false information regarding the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines, which goes against CDC guidelines. And all he said was that people with kids and people with prior infection don't need it. But Kulldorff's statement was an expert's opinion, one which also happened to be in line with vaccine policies in numerous other countries. Yet it was deemed false information by Twitter moderators merely because it differed from CDC guidelines. After Twitter took action, Kulldorff's tweet was slapped with a misleading label, and all replies and likes were shut off, throttling the tweet's ability to be seen and shared by many people, the ostensible core function of the platform. So they put a misleading label on it and made it so you couldn't share it, or you couldn't comment or like. In my review of internal files, I found countless instances of tweets labeled as misleading or taken down entirely, sometimes triggering account suspensions simply because they veered from CDC guidance or differed from establishment views. Just wait. You should see what happens at YouTube. A tweet by Kelly KGA, a self-proclaimed public health fact checker with 18,000 followers, was flagged as misleading and replies and likes disabled, even though it displayed the CDC's own data. So it shows this tweet, which has a chart from the CDC, which says, what an excellent example of cherry picking. If you narrow it down to only the specific months you specify, which include the largest COVID wave, and you ignore all non-disease deaths, and you ignore cancer, heart disease, SIDS, then COVID is the leading cause of death. So it's just something that says that COVID isn't actually the leading cause of death unless you do special things to the data, what this person calls cherry picking, and showed the CDC data to show that. No, the leading cause of death is handguns, right? Or semi-automatic assault rifles. The leading cause of death is AR-15s, I thought. Internal records showed that a bot had flagged that. Oh, that was misinformation. Sorry, I was just kidding. That was a joke. Jokes are also frequently labeled as misinformation. Jokes and satire. Internal records show that a bot had flagged the tweet and that it received many tattles, what the system amusingly called reports from users. Oh, so reports from users are called tattles. So you tattletale on someone. That triggered a manual review by a human who, despite the tweet showing actual CDC data, nevertheless labeled it misleading. Tellingly, the tweet by Kelly that was labeled misleading was a reply to a tweet that contained actual misinformation. COVID has never been the leading cause of death from disease in children. Yet that tweet remains on the platform and without a misleading label. So, wow. The tweet that it was a reply to said, since December of 2021, COVID has been the leading cause of death from disease in children, which was never true, which was misinformation. And it was never deemed as such. So now you find out how stuff that the actual misinformation mostly came from the government, like people like Joe Biden, who said that if you get the shot, then you won't ever get sick. Or if you get the shot, you won't die. Or if you get the shot, you won't go to the hospital. All things that are factually untrue. Good time to remind you, the WHO and local health authorities have confirmed that the vaccine is safe and effective. The COVID vaccine, that is, safe and effective, and slows the spread, etc. Whether by humans or algorithms, content that was contrarian but true was still subject to getting flagged or suppressed. This tweet was labeled misleading, even though the owner of this account, a physician, was referring to the results of a published study. This one says, below, the first study I have seen showing that mRNA vaccines in young people, oh boy. You heard my disclaimer, so I'm reading the news, but this is something that previously, like if you reported on this on YouTube, yeah, they take it down. That's how I figured out on YouTube. You report on real facts, but if they were contrary to public health guidelines, they would suppress it. So this person tweeted, below, the first study I've seen showing that mRNA vaccines in young people are associated with cardiac arrests, not just myocarditis. And it shows the various doses and a chart. And that tweet was labeled misleading. I have to tell you guys that cardiac arrest is not a recognized side effect of the vaccines, of the COVID vaccine. We are only allowed to talk about recognized side effects. So that would still be misinformation on YouTube. Andrew Bostom, a Rhode Island physician, was permanently suspended from Twitter after receiving multiple strikes for misinformation. One of his strikes was for a tweet referring to the results from a peer-reviewed study on mRNA vaccines. And this is about sperm count, which says, primary COVID-19 vaccination temporarily impairs semen concentration and total motile count among semen donors with apparent rebound by 5 months, but no data on boostering effect. Does boostering yield another decline? Followed by, okay, and then it shows a link to a study, a peer-reviewed study, which showed that the vaccines apparently reduce sperm count, right? Which, once again, that's considered misinformation by YouTube. So I have to tell you that's not a recognized side effect. Even though it might be a peer-reviewed study, it's not recognized by YouTube. It would be considered disinformation to say it. A review of Twitter log files revealed that an internal audit conducted after Boston's attorney contacted Twitter found that only one of Boston's 5 violations were valid. So they did a review, they did an internal audit after his attorney contacted them and found only one of the tweets should have been a violation. And then it says they unsuspended the user and responded to their appeal to let them know they rescinded the suspension. So that person got their account reinstated. The one Boston tweet that found to be in violation cited data that was legitimate but inconvenient to the public health establishment's narrative about the risks of flu versus COVID in children. And this is a study that shows what is true. I mean, I don't even know how else to say it. It is true that flu is more deadly than COVID in children. Another one of those things where it was like, if you say that, they'd say it was disinformation. So that this tweet was not only flagged by a bot, but its violation manually affirmed by a staff member is telling of both the algorithmic and human bias at play. Boston's account was suspended for months and was finally restored on Christmas Day. Another example of human bias run amok was the reaction to this tweet by Trump. Many Trump tweets led to extensive internal debates, and this one was no different. He said, "I will be leaving the great Walter Reed Medical Center today at 6:30 p.m., feeling really good. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed under the Trump administration some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago," he said. In a surreal exchange, Jim Baker, at the time Twitter's deputy general counsel, asks why telling people to not be afraid wasn't a violation of Twitter's COVID-19 misinformation policy. My God.
You must be afraid.
He is asking why that isn't a violation. That's Jim Baker for you, the guy that worked at the FBI and was responsible for suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story the most. Why isn't the POTUS tweet a violation of COVID-19, especially the "don't be afraid of COVID" statement? So just telling people don't be afraid. Look at these screenshots. Okay. Yoel Roth, Twitter's former head of trust and safety, had to explain that optimism wasn't misinformation. And this is Yoel Roth. Adding to the main thread on this subject, in short, this tweet is a broad, optimistic statement. It doesn't incite people to do something harmful, nor does it recommend against taking precautions or following mask directives or other guidelines. It doesn't fall within the published scope of our policies. Remember, Kelly KGA with the CDC data tweet? Twitter's response to her is clarifying. Quote, "We will prioritize review and labeling of content that could lead to increased exposure or transmission," unquote. So, I mean, here's the thing is about COVID misinformation is they basically said that anything that would lead people not to get vaccinated is misinformation. So, which means that even if it was true, almost like, especially if it was true, anything that would lead people not to get vaccinated for any reason would just be labeled misinformation, whether it was true or not. And really, especially if it's true, because that would make people not want to get vaccinated. And that was like their primary purpose, the government, making sure as many people got vaccinated as possible, because of the money involved, basically. So this is their review of their explanation of them labeling her content as misleading. Let me see. Thanks for getting back to us. Proactively monitor, help ensure we're not amplifying tweets with these warnings or labels. Additionally, we'll continue to rely on trusted partners to identify content that is likely to result in offline harm. Given the dynamic situation, we will prioritize review and labeling of content that could lead to increased exposure or transmission. Twitter made a decision via the political leanings of senior staff and government pressure that the public health authorities' approach to the pandemic, prioritizing mitigation over other concerns, was quote unquote the science. Information that challenged that view, such as showing harms of vaccines or that could be perceived as downplaying the risks of COVID, especially to children, was subject to moderation or even suppressed, no matter whether such views were correct or adopted abroad. What might this pandemic and its aftermath have looked like if there had been a more open debate on Twitter and other social media platforms, not to mention the mainstream press, about the origins of COVID, about lockdowns, about the true risks of COVID in kids, and much more? He says thanks to Michael Schellenberger, Lee Fang, Lee Woodhouse, and the team at the Free Press at thefp.com. And this whole thread is published on Elon Musk's platform called Twitter. I told you multiple times about what WHO and the local health authorities say about vaccines. There are only a few recognized side effects, and everybody should take it, regardless of how many times you've had COVID or how many shots you've had or what have you. That's the official line of YouTube still. And on YouTube still, if you say anything that they think would lead to fewer people getting vaccinated, then they'll suppress it or they'll censor you. So you still can't say pretty much anything on Twitter. And there's lots of stuff I want to report on that happens with the jibby jab. There are lots of news stories. There's what DeSantis is doing in Florida. There's what the Germans are uncovering. But I can't really report on it. And if I do report on it, it's so suppressed. If you look at the numbers, it's so suppressed that it's crazy. So there has been no real public debate on certain platforms, definitely not on Google platforms. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if the government asked to take down my channel or videos on my channel when I started talking about the vaccines, because I had a pretty big channel. I was talking about vaccines and I was saying real news stories about true information that was out there, and they would just censor it, and they deleted my channel over it. So here I am back though, and I told you guys the disclaimers, and this was a public story that's happening on Twitter. I'll check if anybody bought me a coffee. Thanks everybody. Hopes everybody's doing well during the holidays. If you want to support these streams, there are going to be more Fauci files coming, apparently. They're saying this is the first in the bunch of the COVID files about the COVID suppression. So it looks like, oops, it's loading up. I'll check if I got any super chats. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Okay. And thanks Dan Whiffen for the coffee. He says Happy New Year. Thanks All That Matters. Got 10 coffees. Says Merry belated Christmas. Thank you, All That Matters. Rick, Homie84, 5 coffees. Thank you. Been listening to you since well before the Q period or even Pizzagate. Was glad you came back to YouTube. You do good work. Thank you for that. Thanks, Rick, Homie84, for those coffees. All right. Thanks, guys. That's the latest news. That's a big update. So YouTube, take it easy on me. I didn't say anything that was misinformation. We just covered what was in the news, and I'll see you guys at the next one. For now, that's what it is.